Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I want to welcome you to today's GCLS Virtual Series event, Reach New Markets, the Risks and Opportunities of Translation. This panel is sponsored by Ylva Publishing, an international publishing house which for over 10 years has been successfully publishing and translating women-loving women fiction books. Their authors have won countless awards over the years. Ylva is currently open for submissions by women authors, cis and trans, from all backgrounds and nationalities, as long as the manuscript is in English. You can find more information on Ylva's website. Thank you again to Ylva for sponsoring this panel. Let's get started. We hope that you enjoyed this event, and I am going to hand it over to today's moderator, Ylva's CEO, Astrid Ohletz.
Hello to everyone. Okay, so my name is Astrid Ohletz. I'm the founder, CEO, and acquiring editor of Ylva Publishing. And we're going to start this panel off with everyone introducing themselves. So maybe Jay, you'd like to start?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay. I'm an author who publishes with Ylva, and I'm also Ylva's senior editor for the English-speaking branch. I write my books in English, and then I also translate them into my native language, German. So basically, I'm my own translator. And I have almost four novels translated into French with Reines de Coeur. One of my novels is translated into Italian, one into Portuguese. And I've written a series of writer's guides that are available in Korean, and we just signed with a publisher in Saudi Arabia. So we are very international, and I'm really looking forward to discussing translations today.
Okay, Edwine, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you, Astrid. So hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining the panel today. I'm Edwine. I'm one of the publishers of Reines de Coeur, and along with my business partners, Isabelle Béprice and Gaël Carion, we co-founded Reines de Coeur Publishing in 2014. And to this day, we are the French leader in female-to-female fiction, fiction romance mostly. And we offer ebook and paperbacks, and we work with over 30 authors, and we've published hundreds of projects. And really what we are committed to doing is to bringing diverse, authentic, unforgettable stories that celebrate and empower the queer community. And all of that with a constant focus on quality. And we've had the pleasure to work with Ylva over the past years. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Schwenk. I'm the owner of the biggest gay romance publishing company in Germany, and I'm a freelancing translator since 2015. I co-founded last year our own translation agency, Delya Translations. And up until now, I've translated about 50 plus romance novels, but I do also do translations in urban fantasy and science fiction.
Brilliant. Caroline.
So I'm Caroline Manchoulas. I am the owner of Ladylit Publishing, but people will mostly know my wife, who is author Harper Bliss. Or they will know me as Mrs. Bliss. So Harper is a romance author, and we work together in publishing her novels. We've sold translation rights in German to Ylva, in French to some publishers. We've also have one book translated in Portuguese, and last year we've self-published a French translation for the first time. And we are looking to do some other self-published translations this year.
Great. So we have a really international panel here. Edwine sits in Vancouver, Canada. Caroline is in Belgium, and well, the three others, we are in Germany. None of us is a native speaker, but all of us have a lot of experience with translations and publishing. We could talk for hours, but really, honestly, we could talk for 3-4 hours and still not have covered everything. So for tonight, we decided on concentrating how to self-publish a translated novel. We will, while discussing this, cover a lot of ground for those who would like to basically go with a publishing house. And I just want to say like a few words. Now with Ylva, we publish books in English and in German, but we also we also had some of our books translated into other languages, but we ran into marketing problems in those other languages. And we love working with Reines de Coeur. One of the reasons why we love working with them. We publish some self-publishers in German, and we also sell licenses to other publishing houses. So if after tonight you decide, wow, no, I don't want to have my novels, translate them on my own with the help of a translator, you can always go and have a look who are the publishing houses out there who are open to translate books. But in our genre, there aren't many. So that is why we decided tonight to concentrate on self-publishing a translated novel. And I'm going to start off with asking Caroline a question.
Yes.
Caroline, how can an author find translators? How much does it cost, like the range, because it is not cheap, that we know? And how does someone choose a professional translator? Because there are good ones and there are bad ones. Basically 3 questions, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I suppose there's several ways. Maybe I'll say how we went about self-publishing our French book. So first of all, we chose French because I'm French speaking. So there could be some quality control after the translation, since it's my mother tongue. And we had already sold translation rights to a French publishing house before, and so we looked up, or we found out who the translator was of one of these novels and contacted them to ask if they would be interested to work directly with us, which they were. So we actually already knew that this was a person who knew what they were doing, because I had read the book, the French translation, so I knew she was good. So I suppose that's one way to find someone, is to, I imagine not everybody has a book translated already, but you can look at other translated books, and you can usually in the book you can see who the translator is, and see if you can contact them in some way, and talk to them, and see if they would be interested in working with you. I think that's a way to find translator. It's a way to find editors as well. When you're a self-publishing author, you can look at other books, but for translators, I think definitely. But then there are also other options. Like, so for the books we're going to be publishing this year, it's going to be one Italian book translation that we're going to do, and it's actually a co-write, a book that Harper co-wrote with another author, and this other author found this translator on Reedsy, which is a website with all kinds of services for self-publishers, and so she had another book translated into Italian already, and got really good feedback from readers, from Italian speakers, that it was a really good quality translation. So I guess we found this translator on Reedsy, but it was through recommendation of this other author that we're going to use her. So I guess recommendations is another way to ask other authors who've had books translated. I think the indie author community is quite helpful and quite happy to talk to each other. So if you see another book by another author that has been translated, you can contact that author and ask, what was their experience, and would they recommend this translator, and get in touch with them that way. So I think are the different ways that you can probably find translators. Then go ahead.
I think that I was just like, since maybe as you said, you can't read the book that has been translated. What I always find helpful is you can have a look at the reviews.
Yes, I was going to say that as well.
Sorry.
Check the reviews.
Sorry. Yeah.
Because often if it's a bad translation, it will be mentioned in reviews.
Yes.
People will say this is really a really bad translation. and if it's a good translation, either some people won't even know it's a translation.
Yeah.
They'll just read it as if it was a book written in that language, or they'll say this is a really good translation. So I think checking the reviews is very important.
It's like I find it always funny when reviewers say about a translated book, oh, it's so wonderful how fluent the author is writing, and I'm like, yeah, the translator was really good, wasn't she? But yeah.
So yes, reviews I think are very important, and also when you are in touch with a translator to get a sample of a chapter translated maybe, or a few paragraphs, and have it read by native speakers or by people who read books in that language regularly, because they will be able to say, okay, this is good, the language is good or not, it flows or not, if you're not a native speaker of that particular language, of course. So I think as an author, especially indie authors tend to be closer to their readers than other authors. Maybe they're in touch, they have mailing lists, Facebook groups and stuff, and you're bound to have some readers who are native speakers of that language, in your fans. So that's what we have done as well.
Yep.
For the first French book we self-published, we did send it to a few French speakers who were in Harper's fan base and who had probably read the book in English already as well. And they were, they gave us feedback. I said, okay, this is really good. The translation is really good. So I would definitely read the whole book in French as well. So I think you can do that as well.
How can you say just a few sentences about the costs? It is not only the translation, right? It's a translation, the editing, and so on and so on. But like for I don't know, let's go with Harper's length. Let's say a 70,000 word novel.
Well, yeah, I think it depends. Because I think translators usually charge by the word, and I've had rates quoted of $5 per word, or 4 euro cent per word, around that price range, I think. And then yes, for a proofreader or an edit after that, you have to pay more. For our first book, we worked in a slightly different way. Is that we had I did some work on it first, and the translator did mostly an edit, a big a thorough edit of the translated work, and she charged by the hour and not by the word, because it was an edit, not a translation. So that's a bit different. But I think for translations, I think those are the kind of rates that I've had quoted for them now recently. For French, and for Italian was about $5 per word. I think there's probably variety, but so I guess for a 65,000 word book, it's about $3,000, I think, for the translation, something like that. I don't know. My math is a bit too late for my math to be completely accurate, but I think it's around that. And then you can get a proofread. I think for a few $100 you can get someone to proofread your book if you can find someone on Readsy again for that as well, which is what we're going to do for the Italian translation. We already have a proofreader lined up for that as well. So
okay, thank you very much.
So it's not cheap.
No, it is not cheap. And I think what probably authors or even readers like in the US are not aware of, that Germany is the second biggest market for book sales. But the thing is, German readers do read a lot, but that's a lot less people than are in the US. So you really have to calculate through, is it going to be worth it? Because we all know what little is left over in the end. But let me ask Edwine. So you found a good translator, hopefully. We all worked with bad translators and regretted it, but you found a good translator. So after the translation is done, what needs to happen, and how do you do quality control of the translations?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Astrid. So just to give back the context, we publish books in French, and we work with Ylva, for instance, and we translate books. So we bring those books into our language. And yeah, quality control, as you name it, is like for us at the forefront of everything we do. Because could you imagine like this wonderful book that you love, that you've read like in English for us, for instance, Book of J, Harper, you know, Julia, you read all those books and they're amazing, and so much so that you really want to bring them into your language for, you know, your public to discover that. And so if that translation is not of quality, it would just be like such a shame. It would just be the biggest like failure. So for us, quality control would be really at the forefront of everything we do. So for that, I would like give a few advice, and I will just give a few step by step of how we tend to develop that type of working situation with translators and what happened after. Maybe taking on like less projects. You know, you start with, you know, one by one. So you really want to make sure that it's okay, and you're setting like good expectations with your translator and with the team that you're working with. Make sure as well that you have a very good network. I would say that the book that is translated with us is probably reviewed by no less than 5 to 10 people. So
wow, okay,
yeah, that's really important to really have that really strong network of people that are professionals, or, you know, they don't have to be professionals, because when you're self-published, maybe you cannot afford that, as we just talked about, but at least people that are passionate about it, people that maybe are just like you, like self-published authors, and you create that like connection, and you can help each other by, you know, giving each other advice and everything. So I would say, yeah, 5 to 10 people. It's not just you, the author, and the translator, and maybe the proofreader, and that's it. It's so much more so than that. So yeah, and so then there is like a few processes. So the two main one I would say is the accuracy of the translation. So you want to do a thorough review on the translation. So you want to be looking for accuracy. You want to make sure it's there is clarity and that it's consistent with the original text. So that is more like the editing part of the translation. That would be the first. In our experience, it's probably better if the people that are working at that stage can read in both languages. Because sometimes what you may want to do, it's a bit takes time, but what you may want to do is to compare line by line. That would be the first thing to do. It's like, did the translator translate everything? Like, did they not forget maybe one sentence in the middle of a paragraph, you know? So in order to do that, I would say that you need to have some sort of knowledge. I'm not saying that you should be fluent in both languages, but at least enough to make the grammar structures and all of that. So when you do the editing piece, you want to make sure that it's coherent overall, that there is an appropriate language use. You know, is that character speaking in a more familiar language or slang, or they're more like proper? And of course, the most important would be consistency with the intended meaning of the original text. You don't want to go too far away. So that would be really like the quality control, is to have a checklist. This is what is very important to me. And I want other people to read that. And I want other professionals to look at it this way. And then we go into what Caroline just talked about, which is the more like the proofreading. And proofreading is a bit less, I would say, it's less of a literary exercise and more like of a format exercise. So you just want to make sure that you don't have any typos or, you know, spelling mistakes or spelling errors or, you know, errors in like formatting. So this is something that, again, that's another person that's usually it's good to work with and pay and to make sure that it's really like nice. It's a bit like the cherry on top or the icing on the cake. That's the last bit of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope it's clear enough. I've tried to really give a list, you know, very, very factual. You know, you want to set the expectation with your translator. You want to have maybe an open line of communication with them so they can come back to you as much as needed. You want to use a software like Microsoft Word using the track change feature. So you can leave each other comments and see what has been changed and maybe give hints on how you want it to be done. You compare the translation line by line. It's not always like nice to do that, but that's very important. And you surround yourself with people who have expertise, people, you know, who are passionate about what they do and who are part of that community. So not to say that they have to be people you pay. It could just be like authors just like you who want to grow together and want to get better at what they do. Yeah, and just keep the quality at the forefront of what you're doing. Like take on less projects, but just make sure that you can do those projects very well.
Yeah, I agree. The German market is right now, our genre is being swamped with bad translations and bad artificial intelligence translation that nobody has edited. And it's, sorry, it's a pest. It really is. One thing I'm wondering, because that is I think it's very specific to the German market and everyone is really surprised about it. So I'm wondering, how is it in France? In Germany, you're basically only allowed to use a title once for a book. So that's what I love about our English books, because we can just use a title we want. In Germany, you really have to check, has the title been, because that also belongs to a translation, right? The blurb and the title. And in Germany, you need to check, has another publishing house a movie or even has a song, is that title being used? And if you use a title that has been used before, there are some exceptions, but basically you would have to pay a lot of money if someone really wants to sue you. So in France, are you free to use whatever title you want?
So yes, there is two answers to that question. We are free to do it. However,
move to France.
It's not all bad about France. No, but is it something that you should keep in mind though? I think sometimes what we do is like, you still want to research to see if that title has been like overly used. Because we are working in a niche market. We don't have that many readers compared like to other type of literature. And so we want to make sure that, this book can be found online or can be referenced with good SEO. So if it's competing against other books that have that title, you may want to think of that, because especially looking on, like Amazon or other like type of shop online like that, you will end up being swamped and not being able to go on the engine search. We are currently having that with a book that we're working on, actually. I realized that the title is not out yet, but the title would be the same as one of the best-selling like books of a French author.
Okay.
And that's, we can definitely flag that as an issue. And that's something that, so we don't have to do it in France. Like we're not, but it's usually recommended though to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and that's also something which, like, if you want to self-publish your translation, we would encourage authors to have the translator check that stuff, because it might be difficult in another language, right?
It is, and I mean, there is another instance with you, Astrid. We've translated Popcorn Love from KLU, and we kept that title because in French it's pretty customary to sometimes keep the same title as the title in English, but then it creates like issues because some people have been looking for that title and they don't really know what language. Sometimes they're like,
we have the same problem.
And I think Amazon kind of merged too, but for two different sellers. We don't want that to be merged, even though it's the same book. That as well, that can create some like it's more like administrative issue, which is
yes,
but the administration and the red tape can be so bad that you may want to avoid that.
My wife always hates it when we use an English title also for the German book, because it makes the royalty thing much more difficult for her. But okay, thank you very much, Edwine. So Julia, our translator. We often talk about translations. We are good friends. We both own publishing houses, so we've talked about a lot of things over the past few years. And one of the things we found is that authors and translators really should discuss things up front and not just like, here is my manuscript translated. So what are some of the important things that authors and translators should talk about up front? And can you give some tips on how to set expectations and what sort of topics should be approached?
Yeah, I think I'm coming from a viewpoint where I've got translations by all the channels that Caroline mentioned. Like, I have a Reetsy profile. I was recommended by other authors, so I have very different approaches of authors that come to me and want to have their manuscripts translated. And what I find with a lot of them is that they don't have a briefing or some kind of forethought for their project prepared. So if you go on Reedsy, if you want to enter your project, you have to enter the word count, you have to enter a deadline, and so on. Sit down before you approach a translator and think about what you expect from the translator. What are the outlines of your project? Which genre is it? Which subgenre is it? If you do romance or fantasy or science fiction, does it have spicy scenes? That is very important for a lot of translators, because a lot of translators don't want to translate spicy scenes, or they do want to, but they want to know upfront about it. How explicit are these spicy scenes? Very important also. What is your budget? That is something you should think about before approaching a translator, because you have to have a baseline on which you want to have the discussion about money on it. What is your deadline? Especially important when you have a series that you want to have translated, in which do you want to have 3 months between the books? Do you have 1 month in between the books? Or is it up to the translator when they have time? Expect that normally a translator is booked for the next 6 to 8 months. That is a normal thing. So be prepared that your book will not be translated and published within 6 to 12 months from the point where you approach the translator. That is quite normal.
Yeah.
And most authors are very surprised when I tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I'm booked until November. I can't do anything about that. And be a little bit skeptical if a translator jumps into your project and says, oh yes, I have all the free time for you, because normally good translators are booked quite a while in advance. So think about money. It's an important thing. Caroline mentioned the range. That is quite realistic, I think. And it is a lot of money you have to upfront. So think about before you contact a translator. But think also about what you would like to have. Do you want a translation only? Do you want a translation, an edited translation, a proofread translation? Do you want your promo material, aka title, blurb, keywords, and so on? Do you want to have more promo material translated, like Facebook posts, social media stuff, website content, and be prepared to pay for everything extra? So normally translation is one thing, editing is something, proofreading is another thing, and so on. You can have in bulk, you can have per word, you can have, we have something in Germany called Normseite. Don't do that. Don't go into this discussion pay by word or by bulk, and that's it. And so one quick excursus on how do I get a feel for the translator? The translator should be translating in his or her mother tongue. So I'm always, if they are bilingual, totally okay, but it should be at least one of their mother tongues they are translating. Ask about the process. How do they go into a translation? What do they translate normally? Look into their portfolio. As a seasoned translator that has struggled many years to get projects in, don't go for a first timer when you're a first timer yourself. If you have no experience in translating novels or letting novels be translated, don't go for a first-time translator, because then you have two inexperienced people, and that is sometimes a recipe for disaster. It can be a good thing. Normally, it's really not. Look for somebody who has experience in the field, who has experience in the genre you want to translate. So choose a translator that translates romance if you want to have a romance novel translated, or a fantasy novel, choose a fantasy translator. That is important, because the vocabulary J is going into the vocabulary and translation problems a little bit later, and that is really viable for the translation, for a good translation. Ask about how familiar they are with your special type of English. Means, are you an American English author? Are you an Australian English author? Are you a British English author? Are they familiar with this kind of English? Because the variation for a translator is this broad when you're translating a novel. Yeah. Are they familiar with the slang you're using in the novel? Do you have special topics like motorcycle gangs, medicine, military vocabulary. Are they familiar with that? Are they experienced in that? Do they have problems with translating dialects, stuff like that? Ask them in advance. There's no shame in asking questions. Ask them before you book them. Be available for questions, as Edwine said, because there will be questions during the translation process.
If it's a good translator, there will be questions during the process. If it's not a good translator, you will have a lot of questions later. and then this is no fun at all. So as Julia said, the clearer you are in the beginning. Like Julia, I remember you telling me that you have clients who ask you to stick as close to the text as possible, even if you don't feel comfortable.
I'm coming to that in a moment, because
Good. So the thing is, you need to talk about all of this before and be happy when they ask you questions during the process.
Yeah. If a translator doesn't want to answer these questions for you, don't book them. Really, don't book them. These are all viable questions, totally normal questions, and a good dialogue is the base for a good book and a good translation and a good communication between the two.
Yeah.
But when they ask you a question, be on time. Don't leave it like a week because sometimes it's important, because it's something that goes through the whole book. And answer them. Please answer them. Just a quick excursus on rights management. Here in Germany, it's not possible to transfer the copyright of the translation to you if you're an American author. It is possible in the US. It is not possible here in Germany. But we can transfer the rights of use, the Nutzungsrechte, like it is in German, to you. But be prepared that you do not own the copyright of the translation. Normally, the translator will transfer the whole rights of usage to you, like no time limit, no location limit, and that's it. It depends on how you want to pay them. It is possible to pay them in advance or to pay them for their work and to get them royalties also. That is also a model that would be possible. So that you have to be you have to write up a short contract, and that's it. Normally, the self-publishing translator will present you with a short contract in English normally. So what Astrid said about how close should you keep to the text or not? My personal pet peeve, because I hate sticking to the text. There is no such thing as a correct or incorrect. There is correct and incorrect translation, but there is nice and beautiful, and there is not so nice and not so beautiful. And it depends on what you would like your translation to be and how much you trust your translator. If you trust the experience of your translator, let them do their job. Let them let the editor do their job, let the proofreader do their job. But do try to use your native speaking readers as some kind of, what Edwine said, some kind of, now I'm out of words.
Quality
checking, yeah. And be prepared that there might be readers of yours that read both languages that come to you and say, oh, the translator didn't translate this correctly. That might be true. But it might be a case also of that couldn't be translated word per word or exactly like it is in English because it sounds stupid in German or in French. Be prepared for that. Talk to your translator when it comes to that. And normally your translator will identify the main problems of where it might be a problem for your readers and talk to you in advance about them. But be prepared that there might be some feedback about that. And my last and most important recommendation is trust your gut. If you talk to your translator and your gut says, this person is not the right person for my book, don't do it. Don't look at their expertise, don't look at their experience, don't look at their portfolio. If your gut says, don't do this, then don't do it. But if your gut says, well, that's right, then look at their expertise, look at their portfolio, and then go with it.
Yeah, I know you could talk for a few more hours about stuff, right? But I think this is like a 101 of the translation stuff. So now we're going to Jay. I have a question for you too, and that's, wow, we could have a whole seminar just about that question, really. What are some of the challenges of translations, like formality, but I find really interesting pop culture references, humor, gender, and stuff like, I didn't have it on my list here, but like names of supermarkets. Not everyone knows Target in Germany, or, you know, stuff like that. So go, Jay.
Yeah, so basically I will give you a list of challenges, and what you can do with some of these things is create like a checklist, because the people that will be part of your quality control team will probably be readers who have never done this before. So you could give them some guidelines, what to look for to get an idea of, is this a good translation, or is it like average, or is it one you should not go for? And then you can compare different translators. I would always say get samples from different translators and then pick the best one.
Or the one with the least mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, you still need to pair it with a strong editor and with a good proofreading team. But if the translation is already bad, then even a good editor can't do that much with it. So the first area I would say that you should check is one that Julia already mentioned, and I think Edwine mentioned it too, is how close did they stick to the original? A good translator sticks as close to the original as possible, but also not too close. It's a very careful balance, because each language has its own structure and flow and rhythm. And something you can do in English, you can do in German, like participles. That sounds very clunky in German. And it's just, then it's better just to separate maybe the sentence and make it 2 sentences.
Yeah.
So if I read a translation, it shouldn't read like a translation. It should read as if this is the original, while also staying true, on the other hand, to the author's style and their tone. And that's my second point. The emotion is something that a good translator needs to focus on, especially if you're writing in a genre such as I do, romance, where the emotion is key. Ask your test readers, did the translator evoke the same emotion as the original? Is the tone the same as in your original? Is it lighthearted where it should be lighthearted? Is it serious where it should be serious? Did it make you feel the same? Is the style similar, or does it sound very academic, for example? So emotions should definitely be on your list. And that also leads to my third point, is one area that can be very tough to translate is humor. My books, for example, have a lot of banter. And already when I'm writing something, I'm like, oh my God, that's gonna be tricky to translate. Because humor depends on cultural things a lot, on knowledge that someone from that culture has, but someone from another culture won't have. Or it can depend a lot on wordplay, on double meanings that words have in one language, but maybe they don't in another. To give you an example, if you have a phrase like being family, I use that in a piece of banter between 2 characters, because in English it can mean being related, or it can mean being part of the LGBTQ community. But in German, it only has that one meaning. So if you translate that word for word, it makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
It loses any bit of humor that was in the original. So for that scene to work, the translator will have to deviate from the original and have something that conveys a sense of humor, and it is a joke, but it needs to be based on completely different words. So you can see it's not an easy thing to do. Not everyone can do it. I would say a really good translator needs to keep in mind that they're not just translating between two different languages, they are translating between different cultures. And depending on what language you're translating from and what language you're translating into, the more different these cultures are, the more you need to adjust the translation. For example, when a character in one of my English language books says something like, "Oh, thank you very much, I really, really appreciate it." If I translated that word for word, it would convey a level of appreciation that I don't really mean in German. To my German readers, it would read so over the top, totally exaggerated, like just too much. Like, oh my God, did they just hand them like $1 million? Or why is she so over the top grateful? So if I would, to achieve the same effect in German, I would have to tone it down. So that's why what I mean with you have to keep the culture and how people talk to each other in mind when you translate. Yeah, another area where I would say, if you have steamy scenes, and I think Julia mentioned that you should discuss your heat level with your translator beforehand. Are they comfortable with it? If you have, let's say you have BDSM or you have sex toys or anything that your translator might not have experience with, that can have some very unintended humorous side effects. I recently helped an indie author pick a translator for her German translation. And one of the samples had a light BDSM scene where one character gives the other one a light slap on the butt. And the translator didn't keep the context in mind, and she translated cheek, like butt cheek, with this cheek. And so in the translation, one character slaps the other one in the face, which is very different, has a very different connotation. So yeah, keep that in mind. Sex scenes are really hard to translate. The only thing harder than writing a good sex scene is translating a good sex scene.
Yeah.
And what's sexy in one language doesn't necessarily translate to being sexy in the other language. So I would even recommend, if your book has a lot of sex scenes or steamy sex scenes, your sample should have at least a little bit of steam in it, so that you can see, okay, what is the translator doing with it? Is it a good translation or not? And last but not least, if you have any kind of marginalized group in your book, like a minority that your translator might not belong to, it could be like a non-binary character or some race or ethnicity that the translator doesn't belong to. I would say you definitely need another sensitivity reader in the language that you're translating into. To give you an example, right now I'm working on a novel that has a non-binary side character in it. And that's going to be tricky in German, because German is a very gendered language, as is, for example, French. So in English, when you're using gender-neutral pronouns, they and them is very established already. In German, there is no one established best choice. There are at least, I would say, 12 that I'm aware of. Some German non-binary people use seer, some use xier, some use they with a D, some use they, them as in English, some use just their name, and they are all not that well established. So the general population might not be familiar with them. Yeah, so if you have something like that in your book, you definitely need someone who reads it just for that aspect. The same, by the way, if you have any kind of like your character is a doctor or a lawyer, or you have any kind of job specific words, you will when I'm translating my own books, I have to do all the research all over again, because the terms are all different in the target language. So I think Edwine called it like you have to have a network, and that's really true. It's not just you and the translator and maybe an editor and maybe a proofreader. You need at least a handful of people who have specialized knowledge. It depends on your book. And all of these things, I think, should go into your checklist and into the list of things you should discuss with your translator before you sign the contract with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The non-binary thing, we published some books with non-binary characters or translated them into German, published them. And we, for one of the books by G. Benson, we sat down and we decided what words we are going to use, but we also implemented in the German version an explanation, because publishing it in English, we received a lot of emails about how many mistakes are in the book because of they, them. But then in German, we were already aware that because as Sandra said, we don't have those words. We wrote a short introduction in the beginning and a longer introduction, like not an introduction, but an introduction into these terms in the back of the book, to make people aware. And thankfully enough, we only got 1 or 2 complaints. And yeah, well, one of the things I just made a note, what I find really important or found out over the years, that the better the original version is edited, the easier it is to translate it. Not all of our books, but some of, when I already know, like this is a book I want to translate into German, we do sometimes invest into line editing, and line editing is really expensive. But the clearer the sentence structure, the clearer the words, when I already know I'm going to publish it into German, the clearer the original manuscript, the easier is the translation in the end. And a lot of authors, English-speaking authors, have a tendency for very, very long sentences. We already discussed this, and that's sometimes not so easy to read in the original, but in German, you can't take the sentences that go over 5 lines and translate them into 5 lines. You have to have 2 or 3 sentences. So if that is already looked out for in the original, it is really easier for the translator. Right. Let's see, boy, we could go on for several, I already said that a few times. So I have one more question I want to ask, and that is maybe more for Caroline. The question, how to choose the language to translate your book into. Let's just say my experience is we had a book, 2 books, I think, translated into Spanish and into Italian. And we found that even though Spanish is used by so many people, Mexican people, for example, are not the people who read the most books. So since translations do cost a lot of money, how do you decide into which book you translate, into which language you translate the book?
I think we mostly decided based on, because most of our sales are in ebooks, so we look at which countries are buying the most ebooks. So
that's a good point.
most of our income is in the US and the UK for the English language books, and then it's in Germany. Also, I'm talking about the English language book. Then it's Germany. So we are very happy to have books translated into German through Ylva, because that is after the English-speaking countries, it's the biggest country for us. And then yes. For us, it was we chose French because because I am French speaking, so there was a level of quality control that we could have, and we didn't have to outsource, and we could control it better. Then we have one book translated in Portuguese into Brazilian Portuguese. We were approached by a publisher who had translated a book by an author who's a friend. And so we thought, okay, why not go? Because it's not. This is not a language that we will ever do by ourselves, I don't think. So why not, have it translated there? But for doing it ourselves, we chose based on, which countries are doing well in ebooks mostly. That is, and which countries which languages we can, kind of control or check ourselves. Yeah. So, but this, for instance, another language that we could do ourselves, because Harper is originally Dutch speaking. That's her mother tongue. So we could translate a book into Dutch or Flemish. But one reason to not do that is that she doesn't want her parents to be able to read her books. So that is one reason. But also the market is way too small. And, it's really not worth doing it. So I doubt we would ever do that ourselves, unless Harper decides all of a sudden that she wants to do the translation herself. Maybe yes, but I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, that's kind of what we base ourselves on for the moment.
Yeah. Anyone else having any thoughts on this? No.
Not on that specifically, but what I find so interesting and why this panel is so important, like the topic of that panel is so important, is that as a self-published author, we know how hard it is to finish, and not even self-published, like as an author, it's really hard to finish a project. So it feels as though like writing it and putting the final dot is is already an accomplishment in itself, which it is, but that's not at all the end of the work. The work is just getting started. So that's the first thing. So when you work on like just a book, not even talking about translation, then you go into the editing and the proofreading. As you mentioned, Astrid, the editing is so important, because then that's what makes the quality of, you want to translate a book that was already like well edited when it was firstly written. Then you would assume maybe, and it's a paradox, but then you would assume that a translation would be easy because that's a book that's already been edited and went into like thorough editing and proofreading process. And with that panel, what we come to realize is that no, translation is its whole other like translating and editing and facing like so many like more different potential issues. So it may seem like you finish a book, you put the final dot to your story, and then everything after is done and it's easy, where it's really probably just 10% in of all the work you have to put in. So I thought that all the panelists were excellent to explain and show how that is just the beginning of something. And even in translation, it's just not about translating, it's about like thorough editing and all of that. And another thing that I wanted to say, because I was laughing when you were talking about the spicy scenes, that's actually something that we do. We want to ask samples to the translator that we're vetting to translate usually a passage with humor, super important, how they translate the pun and all of that, and how they're going to translate the spicy scenes, because it's probably one of the hardest things to translate. So it's not that we're perverted and we're like, oh, give us like some steam, but it's really like, if you want to vet your translator, that's definitely something you want to ask them to provide for you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know about you all, but I edit a lot of our German translations, and sometimes I want to cry and scream, and sometimes I sit here and I laugh, because obviously something went totally wrong, and then you go back and have a look into the original and you're like, how could someone That's so obvious, but it's like, so editing a translation is a very emotional thing for me often, and especially sex scenes. It's sex scenes. It's like funny because so many authors don't like to write them. So many translators don't like to translate them, and editors are really struggling through them. It's like I really hope at least readers do enjoy them in the end, because it's really a lot of work. Hey, we have like 4 minutes left. I would just say, is there anything from you others that you like? Oh, there's something.
No, but we have two questions in the Q&A.
Do we? I had to check in the Q&A and there was so much. Hang on.
So check the Q&A, not the, I will just read it. The first question is basically, someone had a book that was around 300 pages in English and the translation was 80 pages shorter. And so basically the translator just cut stuff out. And how can someone be sure it will not happen with their work, since usually they do not speak the language? I feel like it was already implied in what we said. You need a team who can help you with that. Ideally, one of your readers who is a native speaker in that language and who has already read the original, or you give them the original to read, and who can say, oh, wait a moment, the entire third chapter is missing, or they left out the sex scene because they were too lazy to translate it, or something like that.
I have another suggestion. You can look at the word count. It should be roughly the same, but in German, it might be 10 to 20% more than the English word count. Depending on how much filler you have in your English manuscript, because in Germany, we tend to let out a lot of verbs of speech. We let out a lot of looking here, looking there. It's just filler like that because it's not as round in German as it is in English. But it should be no more than 20% more than your English word count, and not less than your English word count.
That is true. But everything is true. The filler words also, but German translations will always be longer. Now I found the questions. That's correct. Caroline, to address you, once you have a book translated, what is the best way to market it to readers in another language? That's really difficult, right?
Yes, we're still trying to figure that out properly. Harper has a considerable mailing list for English books, and there are French speakers on there as well. So we did, send it out to the general mailing list, and I'm sure we got some, visibility and through there. We have set up a French-speaking mailing list, but since we only really have one self-published book, we haven't been able to do a whole lot with that yet. We did some advertising, some Amazon advertising in France, which I think it was, we didn't spend a whole lot, and we did get some clicks and sales. So, that was okay. But yeah, we're still working on that, to be honest. So, and for the Italian book, I'm not really sure how we're going to do that. I think the translator we're going to use also helps a bit in marketing when spreading the word. But these are things, it's also quite new still for us as well. So we're still trying to figure that out, if we're honest. I think, the more books you can have translated, the more you will sell, books as well. So we want to invest money and time into getting more books translated, because that will help market all the books really. But it's not easy, that's for sure.
One of the things, like when we had a book translated into Italian a few years ago, the translator was really great because she was in contact with a lot of bloggers in the LGBTQ scene. So that is worth asking a translator, like, is there a possibility you could help with marketing, get me in contact with people in your country and stuff like that?
One of the translators we're going to be using, actually, they offer that service as well, to send review copies out. And I mean, they said it was the first time they had a lesbian romance, but they would try and, you know, see if there was any interest in that as well. So that is indeed something that you can do.
Thank you. Julia, the last question goes to you. Do you believe a good translator needs to have a degree in literature?
I'm so looking forward to that question because my answer is straightforward, yes and no. The thing is, it depends. Normally, a translator with a degree is someone who is classically trained, like more to, we call it Höhenkammerliteratur in Germany, which is the higher literature. And I have several friends who studied translation in university. It's a master degree here in Germany, or it can be. In my personal experience, and that is a very, very, very personal experience, as a publisher, as a translator, the people with degrees are not better as first-timers than people without degrees. And some of the worst translations I've ever read were by people with the translation degrees. So the degree alone doesn't make a good translator. Yes, they learn about structure, they learn about the basics of how a book is normally built, but they do not learn about genre-specific vocabulary, about everything Jay talked about, because that is not taught within a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or anything at German university, at least a German university. It might be on private universities, I have no experience with that, but if you study at a public university in Germany, that is not taught there. And that is, for me, the most important thing. Everything Jay said is so important for a good translation, and that is not taught when you have a degree in translation. So no, that is nothing I would look specifically for in a translator if they have a degree or not.
I agree. We had one translator who had a degree, a formal degree, and there's also like, but we discussed this before, but just saying it again, just because someone is really, really good in nonfiction translations, like in the law firm I worked in for years and years, that person can be really bad when doing fiction translations of any kind. So I'd say too, no, the degree doesn't really say much. It really, you need to have a test drive over the few pages.
For example, you can be a really good translator in crime or in science fiction or in fantasy, but you can also be a really bad translator in romance. That is.
The same is true for editors. It's the same, because you need to know your target group. Isn't it like that is like one of the seminars like I participated in many years ago here in Germany. It's like the one word I heard the most was target group, target group, target group. And that is so true. Wow. So it's 4 minutes after 9. We went a bit over our time limit, but just a bit. And there's so much stuff we would have loved to discuss, like translations by AIs, like some, but maybe there's a chance later in the year to talk about this. But thank you all. Thank you, the panelists. It was a great pleasure for me to have you here this evening in Germany. And thank you also for all the participants. And yeah, and have a great rest of the weekend, right? And with that, I'm leaving, and you should all leave too. That were our instructions. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.